On the morning of August 23, 2022, Stephanie Pavlons left her apartment in Waukesha, Wisconsin at 8:39 a.m. She was wearing a black t-shirt, blue jeans, and white tennis shoes. She had a pink water bottle, a black purse with a chain strap, and a plastic bag. Matthew Pahl left 1 minute behind her. He came back at 11:14, carrying her water bottle. He came back again at 12:29, carrying her purse in a shopping bag. Stephanie never came back at all. The clothes she left in that morning, the black t-shirt, the blue jeans, the white tennis shoes, were the same clothes she was wearing 17 days later when a group of construction workers found what was left of her in the woods. Pahl had never called anyone to say she was missing. September 9th, 2022, Waukesha County, Wisconsin. A crew from Thindorf Construction is working a site off Gulf Road in the town of Delafield. It's routine work, posting no trespassing signs along a strip of wooded land that backs up against a busy frontage road, an interstate, a golf course, and a medical complex. This is not a remote location. But then, one of the workers stops. There is a body in the woods. It has been there long enough that the medical examiner, when she arrives, will not be able to determine how the woman died. There is no phone, no purse, and no identification of any kind. The only things that will eventually tell investigators who she is are her tattoos, a piece of jewelry, a surgical pin inside her wrist from a past procedure, and her dental records. The autopsy will estimate she died sometime between 1 week and 1 month ago. Forensic evidence will later narrow it to a single date, August 23rd. She had been there for over 2 weeks, lying in plain sight of a major road, while the world carried on around her.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
It's the Orthopedic Hospital of Wisconsin on Gulf Road.
Okay, is that the Orthopedic Associates of Wisconsin?
Yep, it's behind it. It's in the vacant lot next to it.
And tell me exactly what happened?
We found a dead body in the woods when we were putting up stakes for no trespassing signs. We smelled something and then saw there's a dead guy back there. He's for a long time, so he ain't coming back from it. So
Okay.
The question that would drive the next 3 years was not only who she was, but why no one had come looking. Stephanie Pavlons had no key to the apartment she lived in. The lease at Willow Park was in Matthew Pahl's name alone, and the building rules said guests could stay no longer than 2 days. She had been there far longer, but she was not a resident in any legal sense. She was a guest who never left, in a home she could not enter without him. Every time he left, she had to go with him, and every time he came back, she had to wait for him to let her in. She had no car, no income outside the house-flipping business he ran and she worked for, and no friends documented anywhere in the public record. Her family, her parents, Richard and Georgianne, her grown daughter, Layla, she could only see when he drove her there and dropped her at the curb. He didn't go in. He wasn't welcome in her parents' home, and they made no secret of it. Her mother had watched this relationship for years and knew what kind of man Matthew Pahl was. She just hadn't been able to do anything about it. To the women he was talking to online, Pahl referred to Stephanie as a coworker, an employee. Those women were in the Philippines, and he had been conducting online relationships with 2 of them through Skype while planning to move there in the summer of 2022. Stephanie had apparently been told she was going with him. Investigators came to believe the truth was more cynical. Pahl had wanted her nearby while he recovered from a broken foot that had derailed his plans. She was useful, she was helping with his daily care, and once he was back on his feet, he was leaving without her. Stephanie had been waiting on a passport. She was planning to go with him. He was planning to go without her. Her mother believed Pahl had been knocking Stephanie around for years, and medical records confirmed she had been treated for a blown eardrum. And then there were the journals, written between July 2020 and April 2021, eventually handed to investigators by her parents. In her own words, Stephanie wrote about his temper, his control, his eyes full of hate. She called him Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. She wrote about him taking her prescription medications and growing angry when she tried to access medicine prescribed for her own body. One entry read, "Another depressing and physically abusing day. I think he likes to do it." The next entry described being hit hard, a mark left on her chest, and photographs from that period showed her with a bruised and swollen eye. There was also a handwritten note, one that would become the center of the entire prosecution's case. She wrote that she was done being blamed, done being used, done being taken for granted. She told him to go be with someone else. She mentioned karma. She mentioned his injury. The prosecution would later argue this was not a note from someone who wanted to end her life. It was a goodbye letter to him. She had been trying to leave. Between March and June of 2022, 380 messages were deleted from Stephanie's devices, and between August and September, 93 more were gone, so that by the time investigators looked, a significant portion of her digital record was simply vanished. But something had shifted in the months before August 23rd. Her neurologist noted at her last visit in May that she had gone over a year without a seizure, showed no signs of self-harm, and seemed more upbeat than he had seen her in a long time. By June, she had reconnected with an old friend named Andy, made dinner plans, and posted warmly on Facebook for the first time in a while. A photograph taken in her parents' garage around that time showed Stephanie smiling at the camera, relaxed, someone allowing herself finally to look ahead. She had a dental appointment booked for September 2nd and had never missed a confirmation, not once. The office called and messaged 3 times in the days after August 19th, and she never responded. The office marked her as a no-call, no-show, which told her mother immediately that something was wrong. She always responded, and then, one morning, she didn't. On the morning of August 23rd, according to prosecutors, Stephanie Pavlons made her move. They left the apartment 1 minute apart, and on any other morning it would mean nothing. Pahl pulled his truck around and collected her, and they drove to a quick trip on Grandview Boulevard. Stephanie went inside and bought them both breakfast while Pahl waited in the truck, then came back out to throw away the trash before climbing back in. They were back on the road by roughly 9 in the morning, headed for the Orthopedic Associates of Wisconsin on Gulf Road in the town of Delafield, where Pahl had an appointment for his broken foot. Cell phone data placed both phones near the AWA building by 9:20 a.m., and by 9:34, Pahl was in the clinic's waiting room, where he snapped a photo of his view and sent it to a friend before being seen by a doctor 4 minutes later. His appointment concluded at 11:33 a.m. Stephanie stayed in the truck. By roughly 10:52 a.m., both phones were moving east toward the wooded area, which means there is a window between 10:33 and 10:52 a.m., roughly 20 minutes somewhere on or near that property. 20 minutes. No activity on his phone, not moving anywhere, no record of where Matthew Pahl is or what he is doing. What investigators believe happened in those 20 minutes is this. Stephanie had left the note in the truck while he was inside, got out, walked toward the tree line looking for enough distance to call her mother and get out, and Pahl came after her. She dropped her vape in the grass. He grabbed the chain strap of her black purse and used it to take her life. She fell in the tall grass near the tree line, and he left her there. That theory was never forensically proven. What is confirmed is what he did next. At roughly 11 a.m., Pahl re-entered Willow Park Apartments carrying her pink water bottle, a blue folder under his arm, and a black cell phone clipped to the right side of his shorts pocket, and for the first time in weeks, he did not prop the door open behind him. Pahl had a habit of holding the door, pausing at the threshold, because Stephanie, who had no key, was always right behind him. On August 23rd, he let the door close, walked in alone, and did not look back. At approximately 12:20 p.m., he came back out wearing a different shirt, empty-handed, and at 12:29 p.m., he returned carrying a plastic shopping bag with her black purse with the chain strap. After 8:39 that morning, Stephanie Pavlons does not appear on the Willow Park security cameras again, not that afternoon, not that evening, not the next day, not any of the 17 that followed. On August 25th, 2 days after Stephanie died, Matthew Pahl picked up her prescription medications, did not call her parents, did not call the police, and said nothing to their daughter. Starting that same day, Layla had been calling her mother's phone, and by August 26th, she was leaving angry messages, and Pahl knew and still said nothing. Also, on August 26th, 3 days after Stephanie died, 15 days before anyone found her, he began searching online for her obituary, searching Waukesha County funeral homes, searching local obituary listings, looking for confirmation that she was dead. Confirmation he already had. He kept checking her voicemail. He kept messaging the women in the Philippines through Skype, talking about his plans to move there and maintaining the rhythm of a man with a future. To one of them, he sent a message later entered into evidence. "I'm really worried about something, but I can't tell you through text. Something happened. I can't explain in text." And then spoke to her by Skype for 2 hours. He also contacted his father, someone he hadn't spoken to since June, and told him the same thing, and prosecutors argued the searches later recovered from his father's devices were run by Pahl himself during a visit, on a device that wasn't his. He also started sending messages from Stephanie's Facebook account, writing as her to the woman in the Philippines he was still planning to move to, with messages going out as late as September 2022, so that anyone receiving them had no way of knowing they were not from Stephanie. By September 6th, cell data placed him at the location in the woods off Gulf Road, a few hundred meters from the OAW clinic where her body was decomposing, and he offered no explanation for why his phone placed him there. That same week, car wash footage recorded him cleaning out his truck, but at no point did he pause, pull back a floor mat, or react as though he'd found anything unexpected. And he later told investigators he had discovered Stephanie's purse in the truck while cleaning it, which investigators noted had no explanation, given that the same purse had been on camera coming back into his apartment on August 23rd. On September 9th, Pahl had a scheduled appointment at the OAW clinic, a few hundred meters from where her body had just been found, and when he arrived and saw the area scattered with law enforcement vehicles and crime scene tape, he did not park and go inside the way every other patient did that morning. He drove straight past. Unlike everyone else there, Pahl already knew exactly why the police were present. On September 11th, more messages went out from Stephanie's Facebook account. By September 16th, before investigators had so much as called him, he had begun searching for Pavlons by name daily across obituary listings and local news. And when investigators searched his apartment on September 17th, his phone's web history included searches for Waukesha County obituaries, funeral homes, and the phrase "dead body found by construction crew." In that apartment, they found her purse, her water bottle, and her prescription drugs still sitting there, along with a note in which he had researched extradition law and listed countries with no extradition treaties with the United States. Before the detectives at his door had told them why they were there, before they had said her name or mentioned a body, Matthew Pahl looked at them and said, "Do you think I cut up a body in there or something?" Detectives had made a decision before they ever sat down with Pahl. They went to Willow Park's building management first, requested weeks of the complex's security footage, and established a timeline so that when the interrogation on September 17th finally happened, it was a very different kind of conversation, one where they already knew the answers to most of the questions. They let him talk. He told them he hadn't seen Stephanie in weeks, that she had left her purse in his truck after they went furniture shopping, that she had a history of mental health problems and had been wanting to take her own life. He said he had found a note written on yellow paper tucked under a floor mat, and that was why he hadn't worried. The note he described from memory sounded like the goodbye letter investigators had already recovered from the apartment, the one Stephanie had actually written. But when detectives pressed him on the contents, he said she was tired of everybody and hated everyone. And no note matching that description was ever found. The actual letter said she was done being used, done with him, done. And the difference between those two documents was the difference between a farewell to a man and a note from someone who wanted to take her own life. Pahl needed the world to believe it was the second thing. When investigators told him about the surveillance footage, Stephanie's water bottle, her purse, and a shopping bag, he shifted, said there were 2 purses, and contradicted himself about her phone, saying first she had left it at the apartment, and then suggesting it might have been in the truck. When detectives confronted him directly and placed the footage in front of him, he said, "I honestly don't recall everything." Then, "I can't be honest anymore." The detective said, "What do you mean you can't be honest?" He said, "Because you keep twisting everything I say." When they pointed out that the footage showed him carrying her things home on the same afternoon she disappeared, he addressed the purse and water bottle directly. "I have nothing to do with what happened to her, so that purse and water bottle, it's not going to prove anything. It's not going to prove or disprove anything." He was taken into custody that day and then released, and on September 18th, he was formally arrested. When investigators extracted data from his phone, they found screenshots of news coverage about a body in Delafield, Stephanie's driver's license, police press releases, and photos of her prescription bottles. The truck was searched on September 20th. Luminol in the truck bed showed some illumination, but every swab came back negative for human blood, and Stephanie's DNA was not found anywhere in the vehicle. A cadaver dog from Racine County alerted to the truck bed, and the defense would later challenge the result. And here is where the case nearly unraveled. There was no cause of death. The body had decomposed beyond forensic certainty, and the defense had Stephanie's prescription history, seizure medication, oxycodone for chronic neck pain, Xanax for anxiety, and a toxicologist ready to explain how any one of those drugs, or a combination, could have caused a medical crisis without leaving a trace. She had a documented history of depression. None of that proved Pahl's innocence, but it was enough to make a jury's job genuinely difficult, and the prosecution knew it going in. Pahl was formally charged in September 2023, a full year after the body was found, and the legal team immediately moved to have the case dismissed. No cause of death, no basis for a homicide charge. The motion was denied. The case proceeded, then stalled through attorney changes and delays, and the Pavlons family waited. 3 years in total, from the woods to the courtroom. The trial did not begin until October 2025, and over 3 years after Stephanie was left in those woods, Matthew Pahl finally sat down in a courtroom to answer for it. The trial ran through 8 days of proceedings, with the jury bussed to the crime scene off Gulf Road so they could stand in that strip of woods themselves and understand what they were being asked to decide. The medical examiner testified that cause of death could not be determined. The body had been in August heat for over 2 weeks, and there was nothing left to tell the story forensically. The hyoid bone, the small structure in the throat that fractures under pressure, was intact, which did not mean she was taken by force. It meant there was no physical proof either way. 2 items were recovered within 15 feet of her body: a disposable scalpel, unused, matching scalpels found in her purse, and her vape laying in the grass near the tree line. The state argued Pahl placed the scalpel there to suggest she wanted to take her own life. The case was entirely circumstantial. The prosecution never pretended anyways, and what they argued was that the circumstances formed a single, inescapable picture. He searched for her obituary before her body was found. He drove to where she was decomposing before anyone else knew she was there. He sent messages from her account after she was dead. He has never once in 25 days done anything that a man does when he doesn't know where someone is. He thinks he's the smartest man in the room, Gordon told the jury. He wasn't. The defense told the jury that none of this proved it. No trauma, no cause of death, and natural causes could not be ruled out. In a case built entirely on circumstance, this was not a frivolous argument. But the state answered it. They brought the jury back to June. Stephanie's messages to Andy, the dinner plans, the warmth of someone reaching towards something, and then to that photograph in her parents' garage, the one where she is smiling at the camera, relaxed, someone who after a long time was looking forward. The yellow note, they argued, was not from someone who wanted to take her own life. It was a goodbye to him. She had left it in the truck that morning when she got out. Pahl did not testify, and when asked later why he had chosen not to take the stand, he said, "I think Opper is too good at fabrication, so I don't think it would be a good idea for me to testify." On November 4th, 2025, the jury went out and came back in under an hour, and in over 40 years of legal experience,
verdicts read as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant, Matthew E. Pahl, guilty of first-degree intentional homicide as charged.
November 11th, 2025. He was brought back for sentencing and given the opportunity to address the court. He had been convicted. Stephanie's parents were in that room. He could have said anything. Judge Ramirez had been listening. At sentencing, prosecutors laid out his history for the court: cocaine dealing, a prior investigation that was ultimately dismissed, and a 1993 Milwaukee homicide inquiry in which he was the only suspect and was never charged. Prosecutor Christy Gordon called him the epitome of domestic violence and told the court he was a danger to any woman who would ever enter a relationship with him. He called Pahl's claims pure nonsense and said the jury's speed made that clear, then described what he had observed across the trial: a man who exerted financial, emotional, and physical control over Stephanie Pavlons across decades, a man whose arrogance made him believe he could manage the aftermath of what he had done, a man who could not tolerate being left. Before sentencing, the prosecutor read a statement from Layla, the daughter they had raised together, who was now living without her mother because of what her father had done. "You took an innocent woman's life and hurt so many people. I hope you rot in jail." Judge Ramirez sentenced Matthew Pahl to life in prison without the possibility of parole, with an additional 7.5 years for hiding Stephanie's body, all to run consecutively. He was ordered to pay $8,309 to the Pavlons family for funeral expenses. Stephanie's father said afterward that it was shocking, the amount of information that had come out, things the family hadn't known about. He said it was glad it was over. Stephanie Pavlons was 44 years old. She was quiet, according to the doctor who treated her for years, and caring and loving with a sense of humor, according to the mother who raised her, and more upbeat than usual at her last appointment in the spring of 2022, when something in her life had shifted, and she was, for the first time in a long time, allowing herself to plan ahead. She kept journals and wrote down what was being done to her. She reconnected with an old friend and made dinner plans. She smiled in a photograph in her parents' garage. She was waiting for a passport. She never got to use it.